Hello, once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm your host, GX94 Agriculture Director Doug Falconer, based in Yorkton. We're joined by 620 CKRM Agri-News Director Ryan Young in Regina, and the SaskAgToday.com, the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh, who's in his Saskatoon office today. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good day.
First of all, I guess we should probably talk about the rainfall. There's been a fair bit of rainfall across a good portion of southern Saskatchewan. We can start with you, Kevin. I know you started the week at your farm in southwestern Saskatchewan at Cabri. Can you give us an update on how things are going there for you?
Just too wet to do anything, so retreated back to the Saskatoon office at least for a few days. My impression, though, is that the rainfall was widespread but highly variable. Talked to some producers around Riverhurst, Moose Jaw areas. I think they received a fairly good douse of rain, an inch and a quarter, inch and a half. Not nearly that where I farm down in southwest Saskatchewan, but again, highly variable, but very widespread. Certainly enough that it will have stopped seeding progress across the province.
And Ryan, how about in Regina?
It was raining this morning, just kind of a little bit. And even yesterday, there were some showers as well. And even going back to this previous, I guess earlier in the week, rather, not this previous weekend, but to start the work week, it was kind of raining a good portion from where I was kind of traveling in the Saskatoon area all the way down here to Regina. It was a good general soaking rain. So that's good news for farmers around those areas that got moisture. It's obviously needed. And hopefully there's a little bit more between now and when the seeding really gets going here later on this month.
Yeah, they're certainly calling for, in many areas, showers and rain into next week. So it'll be interesting to see if that materializes.
Yeah, here in Yorkton, we didn't have any rain until Wednesday morning, and it was kind of drizzly all day on and off. We took out supper in the field to Wishart, which is southwest of Foam Lake. And there, by the time we got to Foam Lake, there was actually some snow on the ground, so it was a little cooler that way. And it was kind of snowing when we left Wishart, but we made our way back to Yorkton and it did switch back to rain. So it was just a little cooler that way than it was here. So, and then we had basically nothing yesterday, which being Thursday. And then we've had some more showers again Friday here. So a nice soaking, a good general soaking. I think everybody is happy to get it. So as for the next item on our agenda, we were going to talk a bit about the merger. The Bunge-Viterra Merger doesn't seem to be going away. It was brought up, Ryan, in the Saskatchewan legislature this week.
Yeah, it was brought up in question period. The NDP, they were accusing the Sask party government of being silent on the Bunge-Viterra merger and not really taking a position against the merger, saying that like APAS and other farm groups, it would reduce competition and it would just basically be one big conglomerate of a grain company, again, reducing competition among other concerns. However, the Sask party in response, they said that they're keeping very close tabs on it. They're watching to see how other agribusinesses and other agriculture-related companies are reacting to the Competition Bureau of Canada's report on the proposed merger, as well as talking to leadership from both Bunge and Viterra. They being Premier Scott Moe and Agriculture Minister David Merritt. The NDP ag critic Trent Witherspoon, on a related thought, claimed that Minister Merritt didn't say anything in a committee meeting when Merritt was asked by Witherspoon if he's done anything on the file. So it's kind of a case there of he said, so to speak. So that's kind of how things kind of boiled down in question period in the legislature. And then, of course, speaking to reporters afterward, they were kind of basically saying the same thing. They're just keeping tabs on it, they being the government, and the NDP saying that the provincial government being missing in action.
Kevin?
My personal opinion is that I don't agree with some of the points raised by the Competition Bureau. I don't agree with some of the points raised by the farm groups, APAS, Sask Wheat, Sask Barley. I don't think it's as big a deal as far as reduction in competition, but that's just my personal opinion. And I still think that the two entities, Bunge and Viterra, will find a way to navigate this. This is just one of many countries that they need approval in, and indeed it may result in them having to sell some assets to make it right with the Competition Bureau. But I believe it is proceeding. And one of the things that could indeed be lost is a lot of head office jobs in Regina. Hard to see that being sustained. So that might be indeed one area where there will be a loss. But in my personal opinion, competition out in the countryside was not going to see much of a diminishment if the merger goes ahead.
And just to add to that too, that's one of the questions that Scott Bowe said in his scrum with reporters, that what's going to happen with the Viterra head office? Are jobs going to be affected there? Are jobs going to be affected elsewhere? So we'll just kind of see what happens there. And both companies have said in a statement that the concerns are by the Competition Bureau, they believe are misplaced, but they'll continue to work with them and provide information to address those concerns.
Well, speaking of head offices, there was another story that came out of Regina, out of the Saskatchewan legislature, and that was concerning Farm Credit Canada. And on Thursday, there was a report that perhaps Farm Credit Canada's head office may be leaving Regina and heading to Quebec. That was something you were on top of again, Ryan.
Yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere. I first heard about it right before my program started, and I was kind of surprised, considering Farm Credit Canada's headquarters has been here in the Queen City since seems like time immemorial. So to kind of hear that, you take it with a grain of salt, as you do with many other rumors. And as it turns out, it's not true that they're not going anywhere, they're not moving anywhere or relocating to Quebec, as the rumor had suggested. FCC, they released a statement later on that said that the rumors are not true, they're not moving anywhere. They're focused on being in the community and in Regina, where more than 1,000 of their employees call Regina home. So they were kind of quick to squash those rumors, as for a bit of a brief time. I can imagine that brought some concern to maybe some employees and some people who deal with Farm Credit Canada on a regular basis. As far as the politicians were saying things, Premier Moe said that when he first heard about it, it was just that, rumors. And when he was asked about if he heard in any conversations with leadership at FCC, he said he hadn't had any indication that they were planning on relocating in the first place. So just a lot of rumor and innuendo. And as for the NDP, Trent Witherspoon, he was kind of speaking as if he hadn't heard that the rumors were debunked, but he was saying that the premier should be proactive in ensuring that Farm Credit Canada stays in Regina, because that would have been a big loss had that turned out to be true. So that's quite an interesting development that we had.
Kevin, what do you
See,
think
I'm
of
old
the
enough
top
for the
story?
rough gray hair. I remember when FCC was actually headquartered in Ottawa, and when it was moved to Regina. And if memory serves, Ralph Goodale played a key role in making that all happen. And way back when, it used to be called Farm Credit Corporation, not Farm Credit Canada. But it hasn't always been in Regina, but it's been in Regina, as Ryan said, for a long, long time. Hard to imagine the loss of that head office. So glad that that was only a rumor.
We also learned this week, gentlemen, that some railway workers at CN and CPKC Rail have voted over 95% in favor of strike action. It could happen as soon as, I believe it's May 22nd. What's your reaction to that news, Kevin?
Not surprising that the workers would give a strike mandate, that they would give that tool to their union leadership. So I don't think that's any surprise. The difficulty is that there doesn't seem to be much optimism anywhere that they will reach an agreement and that they will avoid a strike. The other thing is with the current government in Ottawa and the NDP saying that that supports the government, saying they certainly won't support any back to work legislation, and this Liberal government's history of not being quick to enact back to work legislation, a strike at both railways starting May 22nd could go on for a significant length of time. And I think that's the worry that the entire grain industry has.
And what is that grain worry? It's just comes down to not being able to move their grain at all, and that way there's no cash flow.
It's of all the time periods where you could have that sort of a disruption, it's not the worst time. The worst time would be right after harvest when grain movement is brisk. So, but anytime you have a disruption of that nature, you're disappointing customers, you're putting your reputation as a reliable supplier on the line, and it starts backing everything up. So it isn't the worst timing, but a strike of any length, and not only in grain, but in all of the other products that the railways move, would really cripple the Canadian economy. And it certainly producers that were wanting to move grain at that time would be affected almost immediately.
And both railways haven't exactly been tearing it up when it comes to their grain delivery service for basically since the calendar year began.
They certainly have had their challenges, and difficult to see just why when we had, except for the one cold snap in January, which lasted a week or 10 days, relatively good winter weather, and they've still struggled to put good performance numbers together. But eventually they catch up and it does get moved. It wasn't a huge crop to move with the limited carryover. So we're not in a terrible position. There's not a huge number of ships waiting, but anytime there's a rail disruption, it's bad news. And this could be a major one with both railways affected, and the prospect of back to work legislation would take some time, I think, before the government came to that conclusion.
All right, and from that we can move on to the markets. And I think it was Monday and Tuesday we saw canola prices drop, but then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, some strong gains to close up for the week. Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Adam Pacallo.
That's right, yeah, and he said that the July canola and July Minneapolis wheat contracts, they were up overall on the week, as you were just touching on a few moments ago, starting with canola. Adam said that it was up overall by $7 a ton to close today, Friday, at approximately $647. And for July Minneapolis wheat, it was up 20 cents overall to close approximately $7.14.5 a bushel. Some of the factors that he saw with the prices, starting on the wheat side, he was noting that there's in the weather forecast for the southwestern plains portion of the United States, as well in the southwestern part of Russia, the forecasts were calling for not a whole lot of rain in the near term. It's going to be quite dry, actually, so that might drive up some wheat prices as a result. And then for canola, there was some historical rainfall, I guess we could call it, down in Brazil and Argentina and South America, so quite on the opposite end of the weather spectrum. So those were some of the factors that he saw when it came to the prices. I did ask him about the CPKC and CN Rail union strike talks and whether that would be a factor in affecting the markets. And he said that it's definitely something to look at and to keep watching, but he didn't indicate at all that it was a huge factor. It could be in the long run should there be a strike, but he's definitely keeping an eye on it.
Kevin, your reaction to the markets?
Yeah, we've heard some tremendous rainfall reports out of Brazil that are astounding, some crops under a foot of water kind of thing. So that is having an effect in the marketplace for sure. It's good to see some upward movement, because we've had many weeks when the movement has not been upward, and the news has not been good as we watch the grain markets.
All right, and something else that came up this week as Manitoba issued their first crop report of the year. We think it's a little unusual. Usually Saskatchewan issues one at the same time, or maybe even a week earlier, but Manitoba got theirs out this week, and they were, of course, suggesting that seeding progress in Manitoba is about 2% complete. Still pretty low, of course, but the central region being most advanced with about 10% of each of the major cereals already planted. So does that surprise you at all, Kevin?
Manitoba oftentimes can be ahead of Saskatchewan for seeding progress, just depending upon what the weather does. It would be nice to see the Sask crop report resume and put out some reports, but I imagine at this point it's still single digit 1, 2, 3, 4% in total that has been seeded, so maybe not a lot to report, but always good to get those highlights and get a real good picture of where it's raining, where seeding is progressing. It's difficult to put that information together. We talk to various people and we can speculate about what's happening, but when you have a network of crop reporters like Sask Ag does, that gives a far better picture of what exactly is happening in each region.
And to just kind of add to that as well, when I was speaking with crops extension specialist Shannon Chan, she said that the Saskatchewan crop report is about 2 or 3 weeks away from being released and kick off that weekly cycle. So we know for certain that crop reporters are out and about gathering information and seeing how things are going, obviously in the Southwest there and in the South. A lot of the farmers are out in the fields, and we'll see if that rings true or not in 2 or 3 weeks' time.
And of course, there was some late breaking news here on Friday that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has finalized guidance for gene edited plants. What will that mean, I guess, for producers, Kevin?
Well, immediately, it's not something that matters. It's not an immediate kind of thing, but it's an important development. Each country has to decide how they're going to handle gene editing. And some countries have suggested they're going to treat it like a GMO crop, like a genetically modified crop. And that is a very onerous procedure to try to get registration for any crop variety under that regime, including in Canada. Just takes many, many years and many tens or maybe more than that of millions of dollars to do it. CFIA has decided, and this last approval was for feed use. The feed use approval was the last to come. That gene edited crops, where you're not adding new GNA or foreign DNA to the crop, you're just turning on or off some of the existing genes. The gene edited crops will, in most cases, be treated just like regular plant breeding. And the regular plant breeding methods are not nearly so onerous to meet all of the safety requirements. So it's been a long time coming, but great to see Canada proceed this way, and that will mean technological developments with gene editing will be much more proficient and able to proceed in the Canadian marketplace.
And then our final topic of discussion, Sask Power is encouraging producers to be careful out there for spring seeding because they don't want anyone to touch power lines. Obviously, safeties should be tantamount at this time of year, right, Kevin?
Yeah, I've had some experience with that. A number of years ago, folding up my sprayer in the wrong place in the field, never even thought that the hydro lines could be anywhere near, and a big spark in the sky. Didn't do any harm, didn't cause a fire, didn't blow out the tires, but it sure was a stark reminder of being careful. And other things, equipment being too close to a power pole, or with a roller or seeding equipment taking down a power pole, but also the height thing with augers, with sprayers, especially when they're folding up or unfolding. It is something fairly new in the last couple of years, where Sask Power has monitored and put a number on the number of incidents, and it's a good reminder to everyone this time of year.
I remember when I was helping my dad farm and pulling 70 feet of harrows, and always just like, hey, you got to give yourself a pretty wide berth around some of these power poles and that, because you just didn't know. You didn't want to wrap it around that power pole. And obviously, it might not have touched the power pole. You certainly don't want to wrap your equipment around it. So it's a cost issue as well if you do cause some damage if you touch a power pole.
Yeah, and some of the heavy equipment, like a land roller, where a lot of the pulse crops are rolled, that's heavy enough that at 7 or 8 mile an hour it would take down a power pole, I believe. And I've you come close to a few of them over time. You get pretty good over time, but you like to get as close as possible, but it's easy to overdo it.
Well, on that note, I think that'll conclude our edition of this week's edition of the saskagtoday.com Roundtable. On behalf of Chief Agricultural Editor Kevin Hursh and 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young. I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer saying so long until next week.